What is up YouTube? Johnny B here again today, and we are bringing you another video on the 2015 Tacoma. It is time to finally see if we can get it running. This box right here behind me contains various parts that we needed just to be able to get it to turn on, mainly being, you know, the intake manifold, the cam sensor, and the oil filter housing thing. I don't know exactly what it's called, but that thing's broken and you can't put an oil filter on there, and if you don't have an oil filter on there, you won't be able to turn it on because it's just going to spew out all the oil. So those were just like the basic necessities just to be able to test it, you know, make sure the engine's good, be able to move it around when needed. Obviously all of the coolant lines are not going to be connected, so it will overheat if we leave it on for too long, but it's just going to be to move it around and you know, to have it mobile to where we don't need to be pushing it around, because that would just make things much more difficult. So let's go ahead and remove all those broken parts that I showed you guys in the last video. And starting off, the first part you guys see is this oil filter housing. This one doesn't come with the oil cooler, but I'm sure we can get that separately or fix the one that we have. It's just bent a little. And then this is the main intake. I forgot which part's broken. I believe it's this side probably going through to the throttle body that's broken. And then if you look in here, the throttle body was broken as well, so that's another thing that we needed to replace. And then right underneath here we have the cam sensor that was sheared off as well. And then right under this is the intake manifold, all nice and ready to go, packaged up with some tools so we can go ahead and install it all. So let's go ahead and remove the old stuff first, and then we'll put this stuff on. Here we are again to this tangled mess, and let's remove all this broken stuff. So here is the intake. That little thing broke and then it got shattered right there, big old hole in the intake. And then the intake manifold is just missing this chunk. Obviously we have the throttle body that got messed up, and then somewhere in there, you can barely see it, right dead center, it's the cam sensor that we need to replace. And then we also have the oil filter housing that's going to need to be unbolted, swapped out. Here we have the cam sensor, nice and accessible. I guess technically the cam sensor still works, just that the connection might be falling off every once in a while, and it's usually pretty hidden, so it's definitely a good idea to swap that out. So since it's easily accessible right there, figured why not just change the cam sensor while we're there and pop that right out. Perfect, good as new, like nothing ever happened. All right, so now I can go ahead and remove the intake manifold. I got two 12mm bolts off on each end, but then it looks like they use like an Allen key, so gotta find the right Allen key, and I'm guessing I'm gonna have to do those by hand with regular Allen, so I can go ahead and remove that. But before that, I want to go ahead and install this real quick, since it's right there, easily accessible. It's got a bunch of 12mm bolts. Should be easy to remove. When we got it, the one thing that they ran ahead and removed was this sensor right here where this hole's at. Not sure whether it's the temperature sensor or the pressure sensor, but it's important. So I got the one off of the old one. It's got one connector, and that's gonna go right in there. And to seal it up, I'm gonna be using some Loctite thread sealant. It's high temperature, you can see that. So let's go ahead and throw it on there. I used a 15/16 wrench to be able to remove this. So let's put it on. Here it is on, OEM one. It's a little dirty looking because of the battery acid that landed on it, but you can see the thread sealant right there, looking nice and fresh. So now that that's on, nice and sealed, I can go ahead and connect that back up, and now we won't have an oil leak. Now we can go ahead and remove these Allen bolts, and I found a 5/16 Allen to be the best fitting one. So that's what I'm going to be using to remove. So after removing all of the bolts on the manifold, I realized that there are two brackets holding right there and right there that are holding the intake manifold together. They are 12mm bolts, and then we should be able to pop it out. So there it is. That's how it looks with the intake manifold off, and that looks pretty clean. So I'm just gonna go ahead and put this rag right here, because we don't want anything to land in there and then mess up our valves. So here is the intake manifold out of the way. So here we are. All that is installed. We got the throttle body on there. Had to remake a new hose because the hose that was on there had a nice cut. But now that is all on there and connected, fully bolted on. So now, I believe the last thing to do is to put the intake in regards to the engine, and then we can put the battery somewhere there. I got a brand new battery. And then after that, we should be able to try to see if we can crank this thing and get it started. So here is the top of the engine with the intake on, the intake manifold on, throttle body, the cam sensor, the oil filter housing, and then this section right here was not able to be connected because it's not lining up. You know, I wonder why it's not lining up, but obviously it's this inner fender, and that won't be an issue actually, because the filter is right in this compartment here. So whatever air goes in there is going to be filtered for now. You know, once we get it all finished up, obviously we're going to put it back the right way. But we do need to get the MAV sensor off of the old box and put it on here. So then we can go ahead and put the battery on and see if this thing fires up. All right, so we are inside the Tacoma. It's actually pretty nice in here. That's where I put all the bolts. The seats are nice. It's got a nice little screen for the radio and the backup camera. Let's see if it does have power. Let's put the key in. Ooh, we have power. And a full tank of gas? What? 84,000 miles. All the lights on, obviously. Let's try to see if it cranks. Ooh, turned right on. Ooh, we have a check engine light, traction control, airbag light, seat belt, and the door open light. But it's on, so that's very good. You can clearly see all of the, I think they're called inner aprons, inner fender aprons, the core support, and the inner fender apron on this side is completely destroyed. This has got all wrinkled up, but luckily once we get back here it all looks pretty fine. So what I'm going to end up doing is removing all the stuff that's sitting on the aprons, get all the wiring harnesses out of the way and stuff like that, and then we're just going to go ahead and chop off all of the bent stuff just to pretty much weld on new pieces on there, so we can avoid having to unbend all of this mess. So let's get to chopping. I got myself a little cutter here. So there we are. We got all of the stuff unbolted, got all the parts off, moves a lot of these things up and out of the way. This I'm probably gonna leave here, but it is unbolted, so just in case I need to remove that, I gotta decide where I'm gonna chop it off. That section back there looks to seem perfectly fine. So I'm just gonna chop off pretty much wherever it's messed up and then replace from that forward, because getting to this area to actually replace this piece, there's a bunch of like spot welds, seam welded over here, and it's just a lot of work to be able to get into that area, mainly because you're going to be welding onto the firewall, and when you weld on the firewall, more than likely something's going to catch on fire, that which would probably be a lot of the sound dampening that's behind the firewall, a lot of the carpet and stuff like that. So I don't really want to get too close. So if I can weld on the pieces to make them perfectly straight anywhere closer up here, I will. I did chop this in half so that way I can, when I chop this section, all of this is just gonna come off and I'm not gonna have to worry about still chopping that section while this section is just like hanging. So yep, got all that off. Now I'm gonna go ahead and remove everything off from over there that's gonna be in the way. Luckily, a lot of the connections survived. You can see here, this is for the headlight. This is the bolt for the headlight, which got shattered, but the connection for the headlight is perfect. Same thing with this connector. This just pops off and the clip is in there perfectly. Just everything was pretty safe, which is amazing for that kind of damage. So let's go ahead and continue and remove all this random stuff here. Now we got the second side all stripped down. Everything is out of the way, including the fuse box, which survived, but not the outer shell, just the inside, which is fine by me because I don't want to be rewiring all this stuff. So we're gonna have to find a little cover for that. And everything else over here is also disconnected from this inner fender apron. So now what I'm gonna go ahead and do is I'm gonna chop it probably somewhere around here and then try to sort all this out so that way we can just go ahead and completely remove this whole piece as well as that piece. Little transmission oil cooler. So radiator's right there, completely destroyed. So we're gonna have to get a new one of those as well as that fan. But let's go ahead and chop these off, and this should make the whole front end look a lot better with all the bent stuff completely removed. So that way we don't have to worry about any of that. So here it is. The fender inner apron is completely chopped off. You can see everything now. Pieces right over here. That's where the battery usually sits, in case you guys don't see the design. And then this is part of the bottom core support right here. So yep, chopped off all the nasty bent stuff. And it's nice to see the suspension under here. Everything is looking good. None of it got damaged. None of the frame got damaged. So it's really nice to be able to get, you know, access to everything. It looks like the battery acid just like landed on everything and started like decaying stuff. So I'm gonna have to go ahead and clean that up pretty good. But other than that, everything's looking good. So now on to the other side. Gotta chop it. Gotta be extremely careful because a lot of the wiring harness passes by here. I don't want to chop any of that off and then just give myself extra work that is not needed, and especially wiring is something you do not want to mess with. So here's how we're looking on this side with the piece chopped off. Chopped off everything that was pretty much bent. Everything else is looking pretty normal, pretty fine. So I don't want to have to deal with the firewall like I was talking about earlier. So I was noticing that the ABS was perfectly straight, so this tends to have a little bit of a curve to it. I thought it was from the accident, but it seems to be that's just how they are. They have like a weird curve to them. So looking good on both sides. I actually went ahead and strained out most of it, even though the big bends were like right in this area where I chopped off. Parts of the back did get affected a bit, as well as over here. This was a bit bent. It might still be a bit bent down in there, but once I line up the new pieces to kind of get an idea, I will be 100% sure. And then this part right here was all lifted up. All the spot welds ripped off of that because when the hood was hit, this was just completely lifted up. So I went ahead and smashed it all back down. Got all the spot welds to line up. You can see there where it ripped off. So then we can go ahead and weld that. But you know, make sure that everything is perfectly straight so that when we go to put the hood, everything's gonna line up perfectly. So we got the Tacoma off of the trailer and now it's in the shed, the little cover that we have, and we can look at it much better. You get to see how the frame is perfectly straight, none of it got damaged. The engine is all in its proper area, and the rest of the truck is looking pretty good. You know, you can see where we cut all that stuff up, and gonna get ready to mount in the new piece, which is right over here in the back of this little Tacoma. So the next thing I decided to do to the Tacoma was to clean it up a bit, make sure, you know, there's not a bunch of like oil and other random stuff in here. So I degreased it all, and then I also degreased the front aprons and the front radiator support, which is all one piece at the moment. As you can see, I went ahead and painted it as well. I'm gonna be chopping off most of it right there, so that's why I didn't paint all the way. And then this core support, I'm not sure yet whether I want to keep it or not, since it is one piece, you know, it's part of it, but it is a little bit damaged. So I might just go ahead and throw a new one after I get all of this mocked up, and then this will look like a truck again, because right now it looks pretty crazy just to see some tires on a frame with an engine just chilling right there. So let's go ahead and try to get the cuts exactly the same. So I went ahead and got this side all cut up as straight as I can cut it, so it doesn't look too bad, based off of the old piece that I went ahead and chopped off. And then I brought the template over here just to see how well it matched up, which is literally the piece that I chopped off of that section. And we're gonna got everything to line up, getting the holes to line up, trying to figure out where all the measurements line up. And you can see there the cut is a little bit off, nothing too crazy, and a little bit off there. And then I went ahead and took this bottom piece and matched it up with this. And once I got these holes to sort of line up, and then I got this hole over here to line up as well. Obviously it doesn't look good from this angle, but I can assure you it's straight. And then I got that section right there to line up based off that little overlap. I went ahead and marked it with some spray paint. And then here, because obviously you can see where I started to do some of the cut. And now I have the perfect template to go ahead and chop the truck off and make sure that this is perfectly straight, so that way when we go to introduce that piece to the truck, everything will line up perfectly. We could just go ahead and spot weld it and do the same thing on the other side, and then get everything situated, probably test fit the fenders and the hood and the bumper and etc, just to make sure that everything is going to be lining up properly before doing the final welds. After getting both sides chopped up equally like they should be, so that everything lines up properly, you know, measuring with pieces that I cut off of both sides and just taking specific measurements to make sure that everything's going to be lining up properly. You can see there how everything looking pretty good. Obviously it's still leaning forward, so I have to address that, because the little mounts where this goes onto the chassis are a little bit bent up, so I'm either gonna have to fix these or source some from another Tacoma, which shouldn't be a problem because that's pretty much the same thing for every single Tacoma from 2006, actually 2005, all the way up to 2015, which is this one. And here we are with the cuts over here. Everything's looking good. I just have to make sure that I can hold it up straight, so we can go ahead, tack it, then measure the fenders, make sure that all of these bolting spots here for the fender are actually lining up, and that we don't have any issues with that. So here we are with the mock-up. It's looking pretty good. The cuts were nice and straight. That section still needs to be bent out a little bit, as well as this section still a little bit bent, but overall it's looking really good. To start tack welding it, obviously I'm holding it here with some pliers just to make sure that I can visualize it, but overall it's looking good. You can see we got it all lined up there. They seem to have lined up properly with where I made the cut. Just did a few little spot welds, nothing too crazy, but that's actually holding on really well. I still gotta line up the other side, but I found the front crash beam, so we had bought one. So I'm just gonna be mounting it up, making sure with this that the frame is straight. Luckily those pieces go right on, and then as soon as I test fit this piece, I'll know for sure that the frame wasn't bent at all. So it's usually good to use stock components from other cars just to make sure that pieces on your truck are not bent. There's the bumper crash beam, went on perfectly, so that's how you know that the frame is perfectly straight. I'm gonna go ahead and grab a fender so we can test fit it and make sure, you know, all the bolts where the fender's supposed to line up are actually lining up. So let me go get a fender real quick got it to line up with this little body line right here real good. It's lining up with the door. And then we have the first bolt here, the next bolt after that, and then this top bolt. And then down here, there's one bolt there that bolts to the core support as well. So that is looking perfect. On this side, however, looks like we are a little bit off. Look at that, so close. Not looking too bad there. The back one is on as well. And then we got this lined up right here pretty good with the body line of the truck as well. Obviously we gotta adjust the fender a little bit, but then we also have this bolt down here. I do feel that this side is a little bit high, so depending on how I angle it back here with the cuts, I'm gonna need to chop a little bit more right there. See where it's touching, but over here it's not touching, so I need to chop off a little bit more. And just that angle is actually going to be giving us that correct height. So now that we got the fenders test fit on there, we went ahead and got the hood to test fit that as well. But it's getting late at night, it's a little dark, so we're gonna go ahead and continue this tomorrow. So I'm very happy with the fitment finally. The fender's looking really good. The hood latch is on. I put that little center piece like I said. That way the hood latch has that extra support. Same thing over here. We got the fender lined up. And now that I'm happy with that, we can go ahead and continue welding the core support and the aprons. Gotta weld all that up to make sure that all that's nice and strong. And then pretty much putting on the radiator, condenser, putting all the wiring, putting a battery in there, just pretty much setting it all up how it's gonna end up being. So that's what we're gonna be doing next. So let's go ahead and get to it. As you guys remember, one of the broken pieces was this thermostat right there, and the part just came in. It's a Stant thermostat with the little housing. So this thing is actually one piece. I was fearing that I had to buy this separately from the thermostat, but since it's one piece, we can literally just swap it out, and that's gonna be it for all the broken stuff on the engine. Got the new thermostat on. You can see it right there. So that's good. And now, since we're gonna be welding both of the aprons, the fender aprons, we're gonna go ahead and remove the fenders, put them away, make sure we don't damage them. That way they can get ready for paint later on, and once we put them on, they're gonna be already painted, so the truck is gonna start going together pretty quickly after this. Okay, so I got the fenders off. Now it's time to weld, and before that I went ahead and started grinding everything down. So here's how it looks after. Almost looks like nothing happened. I start putting a lot of the stuff back. Same thing over here. So actually it takes kind of like a little bit of like silicone that goes there. That helps it like blend in. Obviously you can't tell because the cut's like way back in there. And it's looking good. So I'm starting to piece it all together. Starting to get all the lines, putting like the ABS I bolted back, this little like vacuum pump thing, whatever it does. I don't even know what it is, but connected that back up, bolted it down, started running the harness through everything, bolting down the grounds, putting the power steering reservoir back, and now I'm passing some of the AC lines through. Probably gonna end up putting the condenser and the radiator back, start putting all this back as well, and pretty much just start putting the whole inside of the engine bay together. So this is like a sandwich plated oil cooler that connects with the coolant. So these two hoses connect to it, pass coolant through it, so it helps cool the oil. And in the older models, which is where this piece is from, they don't come with one of those. So what you have to do is you need to remove that, and then the kit comes, or at least the newer ones come with this right here. It's like a little adapter, so that won't fit on there unless we remove that. Pop that out. Oh, popped out like nothing. Move this out of the way. So this gets removed. So this is normally where the oil filter grabs onto. I'm gonna move that to the side and make sure this is the correct size. Yep. So then we know that this is gonna work. So So now, you guys are wondering, is right there, Toyota Japan. It's the piece that goes with it. So this goes right here. It even has a little notch for it, even though that's the older one. It still has a little notch for it. And then this just goes on here, and then it just gets tightened down, and then we hook up the hoses to it. Got the new reservoir installed. It looks much better, nice and blue, and then it doesn't have that broken tab that this one had here. So now that's gonna work much better